I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God.
I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
Welcome to Journey to Service. I'm William Laddick, and back again. We have a new look show because we have a new opening and a new closing to the show. We also want to welcome back Randall Kaiser. Plus, we have Lee Mutters joining us as well, and Lee might become a regular depending on how things go in the next little while. Gentlemen, welcome. Welcome, Randall. I'll start with you. Interesting weekend. I wanted to jump into a video you did yesterday where you made a comment. You didn't go into it too much. It was a short video, but you basically said things are going like gangbusters in the banking world in the back. You know, I can't even get into it. It's just too much, but we have a little bit of time. Maybe you can give us a little overview of some of the things that have been happening this weekend.
Yeah, good stuff, William. Thank you so much. It has been a transitional week for everyone. And I mean, it doesn't matter if you're talking about solar flares or alignment of planets or galactic federation of light. Every story is just saying we're just there. We're just there.
And Halloween. I'll throw in Halloween as well.
Halloween, exactly. And we're flipping the lid on that one from it being some kind of a dark ceremony to, bringing out and taking off the masks, okay? And getting this reality on track from this suppression and this deception and illusion that we've been living under for so long. So I think today we'll focus on the monetary system. Lee is involved with Global People's Monetary System, as we know, or GPMS. And I want to, touch on a few more of the things that have been happening behind the scenes, including, conversations that link all of the stories that are out there, from the reset words that they use when they talk about dinar and dongs and whatnot, to these asset-backed accounts that I bring up a lot, to the fact that the corporations are basically dead, and I'll use the word bankrupt for lack of a better word, but these corporate governments around the world have all failed in a monetary sense. So it's all kind of linking together. And I think I'll just, without diving into a real big story here, maybe I'll go back a little bit. I'll just talk in terms of some history, okay? And whether you believe history or not, there's something there, like we have been co-creating a monetary system for many, many, many years, and a lot of it based on objects and assets and stuff. But, the idea of credit, whether you think in terms of 1200 AD or that being 200 AD, as some people think, we tossed an extra 1,000 years in there just to screw with people's minds. But, there was a king at that time, and he was Henry III. And that, if you look at some history, and like I say, it's all believable or not, don't get me wrong. I'm not supporting any Wikipedia or anything like that. It's just, there are some things that we can relate to as far as history. And the simple story here is that King Henry III was sitting on a treasury, okay? So treasury being a certain amount of assets. And in those days, those assets would have been treasured, like gold, silver, bronze, who knows what else they had, and crowns and rings and all kinds of shit that they, treasured, right? And this Henry III was the kind of a guy who really wanted to, and according to, what I've read about him and stuff, he was a pretty good king. So there's some good kings and there's bad kings in history, if you want to believe that, So he was pretty good, and he did a lot of charity work and whatnot, but he wanted the pageantry into this idea of monarchy. So the credit was actually given by the merchants to him. Okay. So they started giving him clothes and, for the other people in his, whatever you call it, lords and ladies and barons and duchesses and countesses and stuff. They would give them clothes because it was quick turnaround of labor to pay back. Okay. So there was a kind of a credit, but it was coming to the sovereign king, if you want to call him that. We'll talk about sovereignty later, from the people. Interestingly enough, it was the people who were the creditors, right? That were giving, right? So then that turned into later in his 56 years, I think he was as king, if you believe this stuff again, that he was actually starting to think in terms of credit the other way. And because he had so much in his treasury, this idea of fractional reserve came into his or other people's heads at that time, where they said, oh, wait a minute here, it doesn't matter how much I have in my treasury. I'm just going to make credit out, and they can pay me back because they know I have a treasury. But that's the idea and the basis of fractional reserve lending, right? Where, basically he didn't have enough to back what he was telling them he had. So this paper story kind of began, and it just kept getting crazier and crazier and crazier over the years as we added to, right, the minds of the masses. And of course, the people that are capitalist minded, even back then or throughout the 300s, 400s, 500s, until we get to where we are now in the thousands or the 2000s, whichever one you want to say, we can see that the potential for this fractional reserve lending and the idea of credit coming from the people comes into the story where we are now, or where we were lately, of, credit, and credit being flipped around so that the people didn't realize they were giving credit to these governments and their gatekeepers for these ancient asset holders, right? So I just wanted to kind of start with that story a little bit. And it's just a story, again, don't get me wrong, but it does relate to what I'm doing in the banking system now, that still involves so-called royalty, so-called people that think that they are more important than others and feel that they have connections, and in fact actually have, as keepers, accounts that are in their names. Now that's the question as to who owns those accounts. Is it the person who has it in their name as the keeper, or does that belong to humanity? And the people I deal with think that it belongs to humanity, and they want it to come through. The central bank system and the way that the unlimited amount, because of these many, many years of building on the fractional reserve side, credit, and then building value into the assets, taking gold, for instance, and saying it had a value of $35, and now it's $1,300. That's all still human construct, still human creation. So to say that somebody or some monarchy actually owns that is wrong, because it's humanity that's putting the value on it, and humanity that's doing that based on stories, not on supply and demand, because they've deceived us in that supply and demand story. And we know that after thousands and thousands of years, we've mined amounts of gold or silver or treasure that never were in the hands of one king or another king or another king. These kings were all over the world, and queens, and they had stashes and treasuries, but it was parts of the whole, which is just massive, this whole. A lot of it not even in the banking system or in the hands of these royals, right? So I was kind of a mouthful, but I'll stop for a minute now.
I'll jump in real quick just to tie it over to Lee, but I think for our viewers, and we have a bunch of new viewers now too, so I'm going to pass it to Lee, but I'd like Lee to give us a little bit of an overview of GPMS, what it is, and then how it ties into what Randall just shared, and or if it ties in at all, even, and if there is, how would we see GPMS tying that in? So first of all, welcome, Lee. It's nice to have you back, and welcome. And can you tell us a little bit about GPMS, please?
Thank you, William. It's been a while. Oh, it's a pleasure to be back. GPMS, it ties in beautifully. GPMS, Global People's Monetary System, started up about the same time as, it was just before, just after. It's been over a year, I think, Randy, since we first did our first interview, there or thereabouts. And at the same time, when Randy was coming out with the monetary, with the asset-backed funds and the ancient funding coming through, another solution came through, which is GPMS, which actually took the funding out of the system and just said money without backing. So these two ran sort of side by side. But let's start again with what GPMS is. So reasonably, we've got at the moment a problem. And the problem is becoming more and more evident for everybody to actually see. All of the systems that were thought to be beneficial have been manipulated, and Randy's good at the manipulation, this sort of stuff. So this has all been said before, but they've all been manipulated in a nefarious way, a malevolent way when you actually look at it, to actually take from the people and oppress and suppress the people. And this is coming to the fore, as we can see right now. So with the problem comes a solution. And the GPMS for me is the solution. GPMS actually gives not ownership, because we're taking all of these words out, but guardianship of all of the benevolent systems across the board back to humanity, or to humanity, not even back to, by creating a system whereby unlimited funds are created to fund everything. Now, Randy's just mentioned there that there is an unlimited supply of asset-backed funding, or assets to fund with. But GPMS works on the basis that you don't need assets, because the value is within the individual. The value is within the soul. The value is within the human soul that is born upon this planet. And therefore, no asset is needed to back that value. And that value by itself is unlimited. So what GPMS does is it takes the value and puts it back into the individual privately, or gives it to the individual privately, and funds every other system for humanity. So basically, it gives humanity the guardianship and stewardship of every benevolent system on the planet back to the humanity as a whole, as opposed to one or two or five or 1,000 individuals who say it's ours, it's ours, it's ours, we'll tell you what to do with it. So it takes away all of that ability for it to be manipulated going forward, and allows humanity to thrive with abundance, complete abundance, as opposed to lack and poverty, which is where we are now. That's a very quick overview, William. If you'd like to take that.
No, that's great. I think, in talking with Randall for 30 straight weeks there, just him and me, we were definitely talking about at times about having a system where it was all based on credit. There wasn't any asset backing it. So it's kind of interesting that the GPMS works on that kind of a model, which I find quite fascinating. As far as what I'm curious about too is the idea of the money that you're talking about in GPMS is that it would give the people the power, so to speak, the control, and say, this is where we want to put our energy. This is what we want to support, and basically have the money that comes from the people support that, if I'm understanding you correctly, Lee. And it's interesting because then it takes away that whole hierarchy, and it gives the individual within the people a certain sense of sovereignty, but as part of a group, which in some ways, if I'm not mistaken, has a kind of a spiritual overtone, because a lot of the spiritualists have always said that we are all one, we are all connected, yet we are all individual at the same time, having our own individual experiences. Do you see, Lee, the GPMS as a kind of like a reflection of that, like a mirror of that concept?
Yeah, it depends on levels of consciousness. It can be whatever you want it to be. It encompasses every single level of consciousness, from the non-spiritual to the highly spiritual, at all sorts of different levels, because it is a divine plan for humanity to move forward with, at its very, very core. We can take that a little bit further, but we'll leave that out for a minute. So yes, it combines all of spirituality. It combines it combines everything, every belief, because what it also comes out with is a divine simplified law, which, as we watch this situation in reality unfold, we're going to see the complexity and the manipulation and the malevolence of the systems were created through the legal structures or the corporate structures. They were the structures which basically removed sovereignty or removed the rights of the human from them. So the inalienable rights that every human soul has on this plane were stripped through the legal structures and through the corporate structures. And of course, it was done in a way that obfuscated the truth from humanity in a way that we thought was beneficial, if you like, and we didn't know any better to a certain degree. But that's all coming to a head at this point in time. So the divine simplified law comes into the sovereign status, which comes into equality, which comes into spirituality, and then you can lead it into higher consciousness, etc., etc. But it's levels of consciousness. So I would say it encompasses, well, it does. It's all encompassing in that aspect.
Randall, I'm wondering too, earlier this week, I mean, the viewers don't know this, but the three of us tend to chat quite a bit on a daily basis, online and in our own private little group. But one of the things that you shared earlier this week that I recall was that you had a vision or an idea or something came to you where you realized how your system could then flow into and tie into the GPMS system. Do you remember that? And if you do, can you tell us a little bit more about that concept?
Yeah, for sure, William. It's like, the basis of GPMS being the energy of God, okay, which is the energy within every single human being, right? So, and that is a beautiful statement, and that's where we are, okay? That's where we need to be, is just thinking that our energy has that much power. And when you bring in the word God, of course, you're bringing in the word consciousness and love, right? So this is where should we have, when this legal system, this corporate legal system was set up, had it been not deceptive, okay, had it been more
upfront,
let's just keep that word in there and just say that we are using your energy to manifest money at that government level, and then keep the people involved, be truthful with them and say, we want to do this, we want to do that. Are you in agreement with that? But instead we brought in these corporate CEOs and all answering to the next corporation above them. Like I say, in Canada here, it's the municipal answering to the provincial, answering to the federal, answering to the crown corporation, right? So that's all legal jurisdiction, mumbo jumbo crap. And they just keep proving it. The deeper I got into this municipal elections process, the more obvious it became that they are not leaders, they're followers, every one of them. And the new mayor got in, and the next day she starts talking about global warming. She never mentioned a word of that before. Proved, ultimately, everything proved to me, like chasing me off their property because I'm trespassing. Like, are you kidding me? You're just showing us that you're just a corporate entity that answers to a corporate entity above you. So really and truly, the system really went amok at the government level, okay, at the corporate level. And that's, there was, I'll still say, and I've said this from the beginning, there was some benevolent potential in the credit system. But where it got to, and it got so out of control, where these governments are the ones, and these corporations being the only ones that are actually allowed to do anything anymore. They've pulled out these asset-backed accounts and said, oh, you can only bring them into the economies of the world if you do it our way, like it's the corporate way. And it was just pathetic. So the reason I support bringing in the treasure of Mother Earth, okay? So there's two aspects then. When I look at it, I think of the energy of God, or the energy of human beings manifesting the money, which is, you know, kind of the government way, but they just lied about it, right? You know, they didn't tell us that we were the ones crediting in that system. So what Lee's talking about is an honest, complete, upfront credit to the people system. However, after all these, you know, generations and generations of the idea of ownership or mine, I think it's going to be transitional personally to get us out of that mindset, you know, and one of the things that we mine, or many of the things that we mine, are these precious metals that people still somehow put value on. And if they don't put value on that, then they put value on their home or their car or other things that they own and consider mine, right? So that transitional period is where I come in with the story that I'm bringing, you know, to say, ultimately, you know, the GPMS story is the way to go, you know? We don't have to put value on things or stuff, you know, just on our human energy. But in the transitional period where we've got not only us, but layers of banking families, layers of wealthy people, and layers of them, you know, like when I say layers, there's, you know, the Forbes magazine or whatever will talk about Bill Gates and those goofballs being, you know, the wealthiest men on earth. That's not even fucking close to the truth. There are layers above them of people that are holding assets off ledger and, you know, just held and blocked in banks that far exceed any of those goofballs, you know? So the layers are so deep that my thoughts are that getting into that as deep as I have and communicating with as many people as I do in these layers, none at the Bill Gates level, none at that fucking goofball, you know, level where they want to manipulate and control the minds of the masses at the government level or those corporate levels, but above that, and I'll say above because I believe they're more benevolent above these malevolent government and corporate structures. So I don't mind using the word above. So communicating with these people who do understand that the value is so massive that any one of these people, let alone groups of people, could change the welfare of mankind and the, you know, the comfort of mankind, and change all of the structure as far as, you know, infrastructure and technology that we currently operate under that's been suppressed by this government corporate mentality, right? So I do believe that, like Lee said, we're climbing to the top of the same mountain, and that mountain is freedom from any kind of mine or mined stuff. But it's, in the meantime, we may have a generation or two to get through. You know, I think the younger people understand what we're talking about, but there's a whole level of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old people that are holding on to something and they're not going to let it go. And should we just tear it out of their hands and vault into the next level of unlimited assets for everyone? Well, that would take away from people who really didn't know what they were doing, and they really, you know, shouldn't be punished for what they were doing, right? So owning a house or having some property, once this opens up and we add to this with asset-backed funding for projects and stuff, the way where I come from, then eventually these people will say, well, maybe I don't need 2 homes. Like, what am I doing? You know, or 6 homes. Let's start with 6 and then drop it down to 5 and then drop it down to 4, drop it down to 2. You know, that kind of idea, because there's lots of people out there that have that kind of capitalist mentality stuck in their heads that are sitting on all kinds of assets, even just within the realms that you and I live in, William. So
I'm just wondering, Randall, you were saying, it sounds to me like, or what I'm hearing, or what I think I'm hearing, and you can clarify it for me, is that in a sense, what you've been talking about is probably more along the lines of the next step, plus clearing away a lot of the old ways that we've been doing things. And there's a lot of crustation there. There's a lot of old beliefs that people will lock onto, because let's face it, a lot of us hate change, you know, and so the idea is that it sounds to me like what you're saying is what you're looking at is probably like the next step of transition. And then GPMS is going to be something that is even going to be another layer above that. But yet in a way, instead of it being more complicated, it actually becomes more simple. And does that sound about right? Because I'm going to ask Lee a question after just get confirmation from you, Randy.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's simplifying it again, because the legal system is nothing but babble and just adding a bunch of corporate, you know, legalese fucking garbage talk into it, you know, like just go into a court and try and listen to what those idiots talk about in there. You'll never understand it. You know, it's made it so complex that it's not even funny. And it's just babble. There's nothing behind it, because it's all based on a lie, the corporate agenda lie of credit that the people should be credited. And then they're calling it debt. Like, fuck. So all of your babble can just go out the door. All of that corporate, government, legal jurisdiction babble is just complete, utter garbage. And it's not getting us nowhere. So we are going to simplify. You're right.
Awesome. Thank you for that confirmation. And I'm not a biblical scholar by any stretch, but for some reason, when you kept saying the word Babel, I kept thinking the Tower of Babel, and I keep thinking there must be some relation or something to that word. But passing it on to Lee. Lee, I know that the GPMS model for me is something that I don't completely yet understand, but then watching some of the videos and things this week that you and Rick had with Maria, I think was late last week or maybe even a little bit previous to that, is that the GPMS model isn't actually fully constructed yet, because it's something that's going to be decided by the people that are a part of that system. It's not, and it's also not something that we're forcing on people. This is going to be something that is a choice for people to make. Can you expand on that a little bit more and add to what Randall was talking about?
GPMS is a crustacean cleaner. On that basis, what you've got is an awful lot of people out there that aren't hanging on to anything because they haven't got anything. And you've got an awful lot of people out there that are disillusioned with the whole thing. Yes, there may be some with a lot that may need to let go of certain things. But in the aspect of the GPMS and the way it works is it's a vote. It's a consent by the people. Now, transitionally, I agree with Randy. There is a transition period, but I don't agree with the timing of it necessarily as we're going through this implosion of reality. I'll call it that. As people start to wake up and realize what's actually going on and what's been going on, they're going to look for something different. And I don't think they're going to accept the same back again. So what GPMS does is it says, look, there's an option here to consent to this, which gives you the freedom, the sovereignty to start off with, because we've got some divine simplified laws in there, which actually give you your unalienable rights back, which have been taken from you, which can't be taken from you, because unalienable means that they can't be given away or taken off you, but yet they have been. So once people start to realize that they are on an equal footing, everybody is on an equal footing. And they can choose something that actually changes their life, their children's life, their grandchildren's life, beneficially for the future, without manipulation and without any way of looping back. Then they can see the choice they can make. Now, what the GPMS model does is it doesn't stop anybody having the old system. It doesn't take anything from anybody. So anybody's got the old fiat currencies or the old asset-backed monies or the private investment funds that Randall's on about can still do it all, because the old system remains as is. But the people now choose to set up a new system, and it runs for the people, of the people, for the people, by the people, and the people then choose how they want to run it. So what the GPMS model is a foundational model for people to consent to that. Yeah, we'll have this system, not that system. That system can stay. You can have you can have whatever you've got. We're just going to do this and build this. Now, the reason it isn't set up yet is because the people haven't chosen it yet. And if we actually put anything in place initially that said it's going to be this, then we're actually limiting what it can be in the model. So the model is there's what, 5-6 billion humans out there that are likely to choose a freedom than they are more likely to choose freedom than they are another system that impoverishes them in the future, possibly. So, and of those 5-6 billion, there are experts in the field of getting this money out to people using the systems that's already there if necessary, using whatever system, but they're there, out there. And as soon as they see this and align with this, once they realize fully what the old system was doing to them, then the system is created and rolls out very, very quickly because it's already there. Everything we need and all the solutions are within the people. I'm not just talking about the GPMS monetary system, because it's the monetary side of it is the sort of tip of the iceberg, because it runs down through every other system, and every other system can be changed then. So governments will be gone. We don't need governments. We need administrations, high consciousness administrations to administer to the people. Well, the structure's there, just the wrong people are in place. So the people step into it. The same with the education system. We've got the people that know what the education system should be like. The structures are there. It can all be changed very, very quickly once the higher consciousness or the freedom to do it is put back in. So once people realize that sovereignty is an equality and that nobody is above you by divine status, by the fact you've got a human soul, then they can start to take their inalienable rights and start to run with them and say, no, we can create something that's much, much cleaner and much better than putting material value into something that could go backwards later. So timelines, transitions, it's all depends on choice. But I also see divine timing in all of this too, with what's going on and what has been going on over the last 2 years, with a certain thing that's kicked off, and how that's pushed and pushed and pushed and oppressed. And you're also seeing lots of people now losing their jobs, losing their futures, losing their careers. So these aren't the ones with the funds. We're not taking anything from anybody. We're not saying you can't have that. What GPMS says is you can have that. We'll have this. And see which one then keeps going. So as I said before, all of the malevolent structures will not be removed from anybody. They'll just wither as people choose a different option. It works. Does that answer that for you, William, slightly?
Yeah, it does. I'm focused on another question that's come up that I haven't asked you before, I don't think, but I wanted to get clarity because you mentioned administrators, which I think is possibly part of the answer to this question. But the one thing that comes to my mind all the time is I've heard the expression of doing things by committee, which sometimes I see GPMS, working in that model, is doing things by group consensus or groupthink, if you will, is that humanity has so many different viewpoints, and the term herding of cats comes to mind, in the sense of, can we all agree on anything? Like, just look at the situation regarding the jab right now. There's one camp that says take the jab, and the people that aren't are risking their lives. And then there's the other side that don't take the jab and say, don't take the jab, and you shouldn't take the jab, and things like that. So, we're constantly in different camps. Is there a way that GPMS is going to be able to work with the people that are part of that system in a way that's going to be beneficial for all, given that everyone's going to have a slightly different viewpoint on, what the best way of operating the system would look like?
Yeah, well, the first thing is transparency and truth, because the camps have been created, division and separation has been created on purpose. You put transparency and truth in there, then you get the full truth, you get full transparency, then you get more of a consensus than you do when you split and divide, which is what's been happening. Not just culturally, societally, physically. You can look at every sort of division that's been put in, and it's all malevolent, and it's all done for a reason. So you give full transparency, and all of a sudden then you get more consensus. GPMS also takes in every single belief system, and every single one of the interesting things that came up the other day is setting up administration groups at the moment. And I'm very much aware that there's cultural and societal differences. So you have cultural and societal administrations. There is not one administration administering this for the world. There are administrations all over the world administering for their cultural and societal needs. That doesn't mean to say each one's a cat and we need to herd them, because they don't need herding once they're free to run without any oppression or suppression or manipulation, because it's now all fully transparent. So along those lines, it covers all of this. I've thought about this before. How do you do this without you don't need an oversight per se. You just need administration for the administrations, and it just lets it run. It just lets the whole thing run on transparency and truth. So once the truth comes out about what science has done and what the governments have done, the corporate structures have done, the crown corporations done, once this starts to hit, the one thing that the populace will want is truth. At the moment, they're happy not to have the truth, if you like, because it's so severe. Just the living, just surviving is so difficult that the truth is no, keep it away. But that's going to be inevitable, that they've got to face that truth. And the one thing they will need to do is have transparency and pure truth. And at that point, then is the change. So hopefully, again, you can see that the all societal and cultural differences and beliefs will be maintained. There isn't a case of you're doing that wrong or you're doing that wrong, because there is no right or wrong. When you're all equal, you run how you want to run.
Mm-hmm. I hear this in circles around food, like farming, growing food, things like that. It's the conversation that I'm hearing often is let's go more local. Let's get away from the export and having to depend on something coming from somewhere else, some far off land from where we live, to be able to sustain us. Whereas we have the knowledge, we have the technology, we have the ability now, even though much of it's hidden, to stop us from actually producing what we need here locally for ourselves to survive on our own without necessarily having to wait for something outside of us. So I see a definite parallel there, Lee, for sure. And what I'm also wondering is that it sounds to me like the structure of what we have currently wouldn't be all that different in the GPMS structure of things. It's just that the decisions would be coming from the bottom up rather than the top down. Is that an accurate portrayal, or am I off a little bit on that?
No. It's the 100% guardianship of the people. So now it's what benefits the people as opposed to what benefits the few. Like you say about the food supplies and the resources, well, that's been done through manipulation to cause suppression, or I use those words again, or lack or poverty to enrich the few. Again, all of these structures that were put into place to make everything so difficult were to enrich the few. Well, they can be made simple to enrich the mass. No, enrich is the wrong word. To give abundance, comfort to the masses, and let the masses then do what they feel they want to do, as opposed to a working. This is one of the things I come across all the time. Well, who's going to do the work? Well, you're assuming that we're born to work. We've got to change some mindsets here. But once we get through this transitional period, and once we can see what's happening, which is what's being forced upon people at this point in time, they're losing their jobs. They're struggling for this, that, and the other in money. And it's becoming all oppressive, and it's squashing them down. They're going to look for a change. They're going to look for something else. And do you want to work 60, 80, 120 hours a week? Is that what you think you're born for? Do you want to bring children into the world thinking that's what they're going to be doing? Or maybe put some time back into your local. Even working on your own energetic fields and even working on releasing your own troubles is working for the populace. It helps everybody. So when we say that we've got to do all of these things, and you look at all of the resources that is around and all of the skill sets that everybody's got. And then that's not even bringing in suppressed technologies, et cetera, which will make it a lot of things a lot easier. Then the simple solution is to release the monetary systems, and to fully fund everything. No tax, no lack, no poverty, no deflation, well, no inflation, deflation. Everything becomes easier. And everything becomes easier, people start to become happier, and everything lifts, and the whole experience lifts, and the pressure's gone. That's the GPMS model. And all it is a choice. And it's not contractual, it's just a vote. Do you fancy that? And once we get the weight of the voice of humanity, 800 million to 1.6 billion is what we're working on. It is unstoppable. Nobody can stop it, because the popular consent, the energies of that, just the energies, no matter the numbers, but that consent says, no, we're going to start a new system. You've had fun with yours. We'll try a new one. Thank you.
Awesome. That paints a rosy picture the way I see it, but it's interesting. I got a visual on that, and I want to ask Randall about this, and maybe Randall can expand and also respond to anything that he's heard you say, Lee. But Randall, what I pictured as Lee was describing that about the old system is almost like an hourglass, in the sense that if things need to go up or if things need to go down, assuming that we're going to leave gravity out of the equation for a minute, it has to always go through that middle section. And there's the middlemen that have been controlling everything. And as a result, you constantly have these bottlenecks that really block flow, that things can only go so fast in the middle of that hourglass. So in a sense, I know that you've been talking about, the release of the middlemen, and getting rid of that middle section. So the hourglass wouldn't become something narrow in the middle, but rather a complete funnel that can go in any direction at any time. Does any of that resonate with you? And please respond to anything that Lee has said or anything that comes to mind based on what we've been talking about the last few minutes.
Yeah, no doubt, William. I mean, what Lee is speaking of in my mind is transitioning to God's law, okay, of do no harm, basically. So transitioning from the legal jurisdiction, which is mostly malevolent, it's mostly controlling, it's mostly middlemen. When you think of an hourglass, there's things on the sides, right, that are pushing and squeezing, and that's where these governments and this central bank system pushes and squeezes so that the trickle can only go through, right? So rather than open it wide up to God's law, right, which would be straight up and down if you use that example of an hourglass, then changing that hourglass and bringing the middle out, like a real divine feminine woman instead of one that's really skinny, right?
I'm not touching that one.
Sorry. I don't know, my head went off on someone. But anyway, just think of that, abundance, okay? Abundance. So she's got a little bit more flesh on her, let's say, or whatever. And it's opening up that center of that hourglass a little bit more. Oh God, I don't know where I went with that. But I guess the words that I've used many times, and the words that are coming out even in the Trump administration, as far as Nasara Jasara, or there's hints and language that talk about him being the 19th president instead of the 46th, which all leads back to more of a common law aspect of life, when we had common law before this legal jurisdiction just kept squeezing and squeezing and squeezing that pyramid, right? Or that hourglass. So this whole idea of the middleman has to go back the other way. And can it go right out here? Yes, it can. If everyone woke up at once, it would just be boom, and we'd be in God's law. Everyone equal, I think that where I'm talking about is bringing back into that common sense, common law truth, like Lee said, the truth and sincerity of knowing some of these simple little facts about democracy and how it supposedly works, like I said it yesterday, and I'll use this as an example. Okay, so 20% of the electorate in Canada, if you listen to the numbers that they give you, if you believe the media that is out there right now, okay, if you believe all of that, then if you also just do one little tiny bit of mathematical research, you'll discover that 20% of the electorate of Canada put Trudeau in power. Does that sound like fucking democracy? Or now we're talking about the city of Calgary deciding to go back and putting fluoride in the water. I did those numbers quickly, and I'm going to damn well include the kids that are 5, 6 years old and put them in there and say, do you really want something on your teeth that's going to help your teeth, but could cause you to have, problems with your brain? That would be full transparency and truth, right? So I think a 5-year-old kid would be able to make that decision. So if I bring those kids in, then we've got 10% of the population of Calgary choosing for the 90% to bring fluoride back in the water. So that's the ridiculousness of that corporate legal jurisdiction democracy, right? So it obviously has to go. It obviously has to change. And would I love to see it go full on God's law, do no harm? Let's just pump the money out and get some projects funding. And would that put people in a comfort position where they don't want to work? I don't believe it would. I think if people were comfortable, they'd want to be creative. They'd want to do things. I mean, especially anybody from 12 years old to fucking 60, where I'm at, or maybe let's go 45 or 50, whatever. Those people aren't going to just want to sit around. They're going to want to do things. So I don't buy into that structure of social credit or, liberalism versus conservatism or capitalism versus communism. All of that is just garbage legal jurisdiction talk that keeps us, battling with one another instead of opening up to the honest, pure truth that government is control the mind. They're there only there to manipulate the masses, and that's it. So I'm really happy that we've decided to have this conversation, because it's monetary, but it's also structural, and we're going to have a structure because we're human beings. We think in terms of structure. We're not like the other animals where, God's law is all there is, and that's all they've ever known, and that's all they'll ever know. Life and death are one thing, and sure, you eat things and you kill things to eat and stuff like that, but you don't try and control and manipulate your species. Like, they don't do that. Humans are the only ones that do that, and we're still in that space where we're going to do something like that. So that being said, from this common law jurisdiction level, where we do discuss sovereignty, and we do discuss things like sovereignty certification for people who comprehend the system, or even, I'll use the word, understand the common law jurisdiction. There's lots of places where you can get, sovereignty certification now and call yourself Lord or whatever you want, and put yourself into that paper manifestation of common law. What GPMS is saying, you give us your autograph, or, and agree with this, you're automatically sovereign, because you just, that's all you are under God's law. You are just like any other animal. You are sovereign. You have direct access to God. You don't have to have a pope in the middle. You don't have to have a government in the middle. You don't have to have a bank in the middle. It's just freedom. So I get what Lee's saying, and I'm so glad it took a little while for us to get to this point, going through that ridiculous mayoralty thing, and I don't regret a second of it, don't get me wrong. But getting back on track as all of this stuff is progressing, both naturally, metaphysically, cosmically, it's just, everybody's in agreement that we're at this time, right, of transition. So it was perfect timing to have this conversation, Lee and William, and thank you.
You're welcome. I have to ask each of you this question. Your feeling right now, as far as how things are progressing and what we're looking toward, do you have a good vibe about it, or do you feel like we have more challenges ahead? I'll start with you, Randall. Any thoughts and feelings on that?
No challenges. Challenges in my mind will just keep making challenges. I think in terms of now, and I believe that now is the time. And I've always said that, and I'll keep saying it, like, I can't say when, but I know it's now. and I'm done with the battle. I'm done with, saying that we still have to clean out this or we still have to clean up that. People will catch up, If they're still in that zone, they're, you know, they need leadership that's going to guide them away from that. We're saying the battle's over. Just relax and do the best you can in your moment, in your now, with the knowledge and experience you have, and trust divine source that it's perfect. And we are at that point. So
how does that feel for you, Lee?
No challenges at all. I agree. I just look at this going forward now. Everything's beautiful. All the layers of consciousness, they will catch up. There is no time to educate anymore. There's just time to move forward, and the time is right now to move forward with all of this. As the truth comes out, education will come in, and release is all going to happen. So change the environment is what I'm thinking. So what we're looking at now is to change the environment for this, and the people will choose this. This is the beauty of it all. The people will choose to change everything, and the truth is going to come out to, and it is coming out to, compress those choices to bring those choices forward in the masses, which is what's happening right now. So they'll choose something different, and they'll choose to change the environment they're in, and the solutions are all there. So there is no challenge. There's just excitement.
So we do have some resistance that we're experiencing. What would you say that resistance would be attributed to? I'll jump it back to Lee here and then Randall as well, because I want to ask you both that question.
I don't think there's resistance per se. I'm not going to drop it down into necessarily what may be going on. There's a sequence of events that are unfolding as opposed to resistance. There's a constant release of information, and there's a constant shift in the collective energy, in the collective frequency, which is a sequence of events moving to a culmination point, a shift, an event. That is very, very close to upon us, whereby a change of paradigm will occur. I like to call it a paradigm prolapse. Maybe that's a little bit too much, but a change of paradigm for many will occur, where the veil will be lifted. The foggy veil of what is or what was will be removed from the masses. So I don't see resistance per se. I just see a sequence of events. I think a lot of us may have anticipated, or no, expected possibly, and got frustrated and disillusioned over this period of time with it not happening quicker. But when you actually sit back and you, like Randy said, you stop the battle, you stop the fight, you go, okay, I see it for what it is. I see it in my own day, my own now. I see it for what it is. It's moving forward consistently. The resistance could be seen as resistance, or it could be seen as a sequence of events just unfolding divinely. And that's the way I prefer to look at it now, as a sequence of events leading up to an event, a shift for humanity to move forwards rather than look backwards. And
Randall, I use the word resistance, and you kind of said in your last answer that you don't really see the resistance. It's more about the now. And Lee gave us an awesome answer. Are you in sync with what Lee's saying, or do you have a different viewpoint on that?
Well, let me put it into a little bit of a 3D perspective, okay? And 3D being from experiential, you know? So, and I know it's my own experience, but when I've brought it to the public in the past, you know, there's been acceptance of it. So the one, I'm going to term it in a video that I made 2 years ago, okay, in the spring, where I talked about the Federal Reserve, okay, and think of the word Federal Reserve and fractional reserve in the same context, okay? That fractional Federal Reserve was a private organization, not a public, and not even a corporate public, you know, if you want to call it government. The Federal Reserve is a private organization of these old banking families who were completely talking about credit, other than a fractional Federal Reserve, okay? So there was a little bit of a Federal Reserve. So in that video a couple of years ago, that went more viewers than any other video I've ever had, and it's deleted along with most of my other videos now. But at that time I said, look at, you know, we've made the switch. And that switch at that time was still to the corporate level US Treasury, okay? I'm not saying the US Treasury is republiced yet, but that's where it's going, I believe. But when it became the US Treasury, think of Treasury in terms of an amount versus fractional reserve, you know, in the Federal Reserve System. So the Treasury started to build again, and it built a power that, and call it from the credit system or call it from assets that have been gathering and been putting in. People will see it on the mainstream media where governments around the world are starting to now buy gold again. You know, Russia's just expanded exponentially. So I'm not saying that any of that is right or wrong. I'm just saying it's that transition to the idea of the Federal Reserve and the US dollar being backed by fuck all but credit. And then, you know, moving to this treasury, which happened over 2 years ago already. And we forget these past timelines when we come into the now, but those actually happened. So from a 3D perspective, I've been working with and functioning in that realm of transition to this asset-backed system once again, knowing that the only exposure has been at the public, still corporate government level, where they've exposed and said, you know, we're moving to, you know, the US Treasury now, right? Rather than the Federal Reserve having the power that it used to have. Federal Reserve now, what do? Talk about interest rates, but they move them 0.25%. Oh, inflation, deflation, they make up all this bullshit economic stories, and it hasn't really moved at all in the last, I don't know, probably 10 years or more, isn't it? Like since we've had basically zero plus a little bit interest rates like this. So they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything and they haven't backed anything. The US Treasury is starting to slowly back things. That being said, the corporate structure has failed and that whole credit thing is going away. So it has to be replaced with some assets. And I'll just slip one out here for everybody, okay? Because we got to end it pretty soon. But in that 3D realm, I know now through US Treasury contacts that I have that Donald Trump himself has cashed in a bunch of dinar, okay? And cashed in means that he was holding dinar, just like a lot of people hold dinar. And I'm not saying get ready, you guys are going to get paid out billions of dollars or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, because there's still going to be some middlemen here that are going to, I don't want to say, they're going to guide the process rather than control the process. And guiding that process has put Donald Trump into a massive, massive position. And because his dedication to the people of the United States of America, that position, they said, okay, you can be the first one that we're going to work with on this dinar, and then you damn well do what you're, you know, promised to do, and that is give this back to the people and get the people back on track. And now I'm talking more on the level of Nasara, which again is a transitional thing. I'm not running it down or saying it's wrong. It's just transitional, just like what I talk about in asset backing is transitional and common law compared to God's law and what Lee speaks of. So, you know, all these transitions, I don't see them happening. I don't foresee them happening. I don't hear them from some other guru on the web. I'm experiencing them because I'm connected. One man away from the US Treasury, one man away from military generals that run the platform trades, one man away or one woman away from the federally regulated tables. These are the connections I have. I'm a mandate, not a principal. So I'm right next to these people. But I am a principal when it comes to off ledger and blocked account holders that all hold more wealth than Bill Gates and Soros and all those goofballs combined. I am direct to those people and I speak to them and I video camera with those people. So that's the 3D aspect of what I wanted to add to what Lee said. Thank you.
Awesome, gentlemen. We are getting close to the end of time here for today's show, but I can see that we could go on for a lot longer. I know that I heard some interesting comments from Lee in a different interview earlier this week about Nasara. I won't go there now because we won't have time to kind of go there now. But I wanted to give Lee one last opportunity to say anything, if there's anything up right now that you'd like to share. Otherwise, I will pass it on to Randall for our closing prayer and give it a wrap for today. Lee.
No, not at this point. I think Randy's, I mean, what we've just discussed between the two of us and bounced across, or three of us, sorry, is perfect. We could dig in deeper. If I wanted to add any more now, it would extrapolate into something that we wouldn't continue. So no, I see the transition slightly. Well, we don't. We both see the transition the same. From the 3D aspect Randy's talking about, there could be construed to be a little bit of a timeline involved with it, but from a different aspect, there wouldn't be. So I totally agree with everything he said. You know, and vice versa. I think we're in a very, very exciting and interesting time. It fascinates me. And I've kept very much tabs with everything that's been going on with what Randy's been doing too, because it all aligns. And of course, when I'm talking about events, I'm very interested in what Randy's got to say about events that he sees. So we talk about this offline as well, don't we, William? So no, at this point, I would just like to say thank you very much for this. And I think that this could be an interesting concept moving forward if we can continue this and delve deeper as the timeline shifts in the weeks that may follow this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Lee. Thank you. And I think Randall and I both would feel the same, that we'd love to have you come by every week. If you want to be part of the regular thing, you are more than welcome. Certainly a lot more to discuss. So we'd love to hear more, plus the progress of what's going on with GPMS and that whole movement. And you've got the URL underneath your name there, so people can see where they can go and get more information about GPMS. And, you know, there's definitely opportunity. The one thing I wanted to do today, but didn't really have time to do, is I started to realize that everything was kind of bouncing through me. I was going back and forth, but never gave the two of you a chance to kind of ask each other questions. So I'd like to be able to bring that in future weeks. But definitely a new look journey to service. We don't know where it's going to lead us. We're only in the now anyway. So let's enjoy the now as much as we can. Randall, I think that's pretty much a wrap on the show. I would love for you to give us any final comments if you have any, and otherwise give us that wonderful closing prayer to wrap up the show.
Well, it's so perfect, like you said, and I want to recommend that anybody that watches this show take a look and autograph. You know, I like the word autograph over signature myself, but autograph that, because what's it gonna, it's not as if you're giving consent to an organization that wants some kind of power position. You're autographing knowing that you are sovereign, knowing that you are equal to everyone, every other man on earth, that you have the power within you to create, that you are a co-creator of the manifestation or process or the co-creation process of GPMS, which is basically, you know, that you're a sovereign and that, you know, you're operating, and that you know that God's law, that benevolent law is all, AWL, all, air, water, land. I flipped that around just to have some fun. You know, it's the law, but it's all AWL. So have some fun, guys. And what else was I going to say? Oh, those of you that are still thinking about complexity, you have the option of being a lord or a lady. You know, like if you want that option, we're giving that too, and transition into that. And that is through First Republic Registrar Foundation, or hordes of other people out there that are speaking this kind of language, that are saying, you want to pay per copy, you want to be a guy, a lord or a lady or whatever, we'll do that for you. So you have that option as well. There's no limits to what we're talking about here. The only, you know, limit is a corporate word. Once again, there's just abundance, and the abundance under God's law is where we're all heading. Call it GPMS, call it what you like. It's God's law, and it is your right and your sovereign right to be free. So with peace, harmony, love, abundance, and freedom for everyone and everything every day on William, mine, and Lee's minds. And yes, let's remind folks that we the three of us got this whole thing started last year about this time. And then we transitioned into Tao Eternally channel, which is, you know, starting to expand, as you said, and this will be on that channel. So abundance, sovereignty, health, love, and euphoria. Catch you guys next week. We love you.
One love to you all.
I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child